Quick, think of the protagonist of a young adult fantasy story. Did you think of a teen chosen one? Maybe a boy wizard. I wouldn't blame you if you did, because the genre's full of them. But that's why this story drew my attention so closely. I'm Otter, and I'm tired of reading about straight people. Welcome to the Queer Book Club. Do 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 do. No, that's Hairspray. I can't sing Hairspray. Anyways, in this series, I'm going to talk about all of the books that I'm reading. Basically, I'm giving you a book report on my pleasure reading. I am by no means a professional reviewer. I did not go to school for this. I went to school for dance. But I did take one creative writing class 16 years ago, so we can pretend that I know what I'm talking about. I can't even say that sentence. So yeah, today we're going to talk about House on the Cerulean Sea. This is one of the first books I picked up when I started getting back into reading recently. I used to, when I was a teen, I loved fantasy, epic fantasy, everything from his Dark Materials, tattoo here, to Lord of the Rings, and everything young adult that has come out, or that came out in the 2010s-ish, I probably read. But I dropped off for a while. I stopped reading as much. And then recently, I got back into fantasy, but I decided to dive into specifically queer-led fantasy because there are so many options for books out there, and honestly, I'm tired of reading about straight protagonists. The market is oversaturated with them, and I can't relate to them as well as I can relate to queer people. That's just because I'm queer. But back when I was in high school, the queer fantasy genre was not nearly as diverse or full of gems as it is now. With the self-publishing boom, we really are getting an amazing variety of stories, and not just through self-publishing. This isn't self-published. Even publishing houses are now willing to take a chance on queer stories, which is fantastic. House on the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune is about a 40-year-old social worker. Now that doesn't sound too fantastical or like an amazing mythic quest, and that's because this isn't a story about a mythic quest. This is a character-driven story about relationships, and that's one of the things I love about it. Our protagonist, Linus Baker, is a social worker who works for the department in charge of magical youth. The department in charge of magical youth, there. Where he goes to orphanages that house magical children and makes sure that they're being taken care of and that they're not a danger to each other and things like that. So that's Linus's job, and he's really good at it. He studies the text of their worker's handbook like a Bible, almost. And he does everything by the book, so much so that extremely upper management sends him to a very special top secret case with the most dangerous children in the land. And that's where we follow his story, where he goes up to this orphanage on an island at the very top of the country. I assume there's not a whole lot of deep world building here, so you sort of have to imagine the rest of the country, which I think actually serves the story really well because it's such an intimate tale. You don't need to know what the rest of the world looks like. But he travels up to this island to meet these children and do his job, which is to assess their living situation and whether or not they're a danger to themselves or those around them. On the way, he meets fantastic characters, each one feeling really individual, each one feeling like they have their own story to tell. And Klune does an amazing job of bringing these characters to life. House on the Cerulean Sea takes place in a world that's much like ours, except every magical being that you can possibly think of exists. It's very, very soft world building that lets you imagine that any creature you've ever imagined exists. A lot of them you don't interact with. A lot of them are throwaway mentions, but you do get this idea that any magical being is possible, which I think is a lot of fun, and it's really nice to find something with this soft world building, soft magic system that just lets the world be a wondrous place. And the magic is never used to solve problems, so they don't need to have hard and fast rules with it. At the same time, it is very much magical creatures, not people using magic. That is the main distinction here. It's these fantastic magical creatures all exist. And they have personalities, they have lives, and they have a place in society. Or they want to have a place in society. You meet everything from a young gnome girl to a baby wyvern, and more fun characters that I won't necessarily spoil for you because some of them are a surprise. But at the end of the day, this story is a story about found family and those who are rejected by society finding their place. And if there is anything more uplifting for a queer story, I can't think of it, because that is a lot of queer people's stories. It's being rejected by society and coming together and finding your own family. And this story is just, if I had to describe it in one word, it would be heartwarming. I love these characters. It's really well written in an approachable way. Nothing's flowery. Everything is very much... Linus is a analytical, simple person who has simple thoughts, but it's done in a way that feels true to the character and accessible. I also love that he does this thing where he has quotes from earlier in the book come back in italics, and when Linus is about to make a mistake that he knows better, he knows he shouldn't be doing this, someone's already had this conversation with him, and that conversation, as you're in your head thinking like, come on man, we talked about this. You talked to so-and-so about this. You should know better. That quote that so-and-so said to them pops up in italics of him remembering it and reminding himself, hey, you had this conversation before. You know the answer to this. You know you're wrong here, and you don't need to have this conversation again. Yet, it lets his character take time to grow on his own terms. And I think that that's really, really, really well handled in this story. I can't really think of very many negatives about it, honestly. I highly recommend it. There's a reason that it is a New York Times bestseller. I'm pretty sure that this was the one. Don't quote me on that. I could be wrong. But there's a reason why people love this book, and I think you will too. I don't want to give any spoilers away about it. It's just simply a lovely tale. It is definitely character-driven, and there are some romance elements, but it is not a romance story. There's just a story with some romance in it. But it will make your heart melt a little bit. So yeah, House in the Cerulean Sea. If you're looking for a warm hug of a story, I would highly recommend it. If you're looking for an epic fantasy adventure, we'll get to some of those later. I don't know if there's much more I can say about this without spoiling things. I do highly, highly recommend this title, and that's one of the reasons why I'm starting this series off with this, because it quickly became one of my new favorite books. And I hope it'll become yours too. Anyways, I'll see you on the next video. I make zero guarantees about when I'm gonna upload things. I read at my own pace, and it is not the pace of a booktuber, I can tell you that much. Anyways, have a good one. Let's let this bus pass. I'm Otter, and I live on a busy street.